Hey guys, it's Jessie with Omaha Mom Talks, and I have some exciting news. I am partnering with Edwards Auto Group, a local car dealership with locations in Nebraska and Iowa, for a fun partnership called Mom versus Machine. Every couple of weeks, I'm going to be test driving a new family vehicle and giving it the full mom review. We're taking it out of the showroom and into the hands of me and my family of four. We're going to be seeing if it can handle car seats, snacks, strollers, backpacks, how easy it is to clean, how much room do we have, and I'll be giving you my honest thoughts. If you have a car that you have been eyeing, let me know. If you have any must-have amenities when looking for a car, share them with me and I'll be sure to give those a closer look. Follow along and see which car can actually keep up with our family chaos. Hey guys, welcome back to Omaha Mom Talks. I'm your host, Jessie Gutierrez, therapist, mom, and first to admit that this parenthood journey is hard. If you're a parent that has struggled with communicating with your child or children about their bodies and sexual health, this episode is for you. Today's episode is all about talking with our kids about their bodies, relationships, and sexual health. And I know this conversation can be really awkward, sometimes confusing on what to say, what not to say, but I want you to know it doesn't have to be traumatizing for you as a parent. To help us make this conversation practical and real, I am joined by Dr. Amanda Holman, Professor of Family Interpersonal and Health Communications at Creighton University. Amanda has spent over 15 years researching how families talk about sex, bodies, and relationships, what works, what gets in the way, and how to make these conversations feel safe and open. Let's get into it. All right, Amanda, thank you so much for being here on Omaha Mom Talks.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah. So before we get into our chat and we dive about sexual health and how to help prepare parents for those chats, share with our listeners just a little bit about you as a human, and then we'll jump into the important work that you do.
Yeah, thanks for asking. I am from Lake Park, Minnesota, which is a very small town up in northern Minnesota.
Okay.
I grew up on an small organic farm. And so it's actually kind of this idyllic, it has like fields and it has a field and it has right on a lake, right? So it was a really cool childhood, like growing up. And we still go back and visit a lot. That's just a little bit about my growing up and where I'm from.
Yeah.
I have two boys.
Okay. How old are they?
7 and 10.
Okay.
And so they are busy. They love sports. They like video games. I think we were talking about that prior to this. They are very funny, and their favorite thing is to figure out how they can make either their dad and I laugh or them laugh, right? Like each other's laugh. I've been married for 15 years to my husband, Will. He's actually from Idaho. And so we met in Montana.
Okay.
And then ended up in Nebraska. When it comes to my education, I did my bachelor's at Concordia College in Moorhead, Minnesota.
Oh, okay.
So up kind of in northern Minnesota. I did my master's at the University of Montana in Missoula, Montana. And then I did my PhD at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. And so that's kind of how we ended up in Nebraska. And then it sucked us in and we just never left.
Okay. And how long have you been in Omaha specifically?
So we've been in Omaha for about 11 years.
Okay.
And so we were in Lincoln for 4, and now we've been here for about 11. I'm an associate professor at Creighton. And so that's, that job came available. It seemed like a really good fit, and I'm still there. And
yeah, tell us a little bit about your job there and the work that you do.
Yeah. So, I'm an associate professor in interpersonal family and health communication. And so a lot of my work focuses on how do families talk about challenging or difficult conversations. I think I've always been interested in conversations or topics that feel uncomfortable, a little weird, a little like you have to stumble through them. I've always just thought they are fun to talk about, fun to kind of navigate through. And so I was like, I want to do this for my job. And so I teach courses that are related to interpersonal family and health communication. And then I do a lot of research. One topic that we're talking about today, the sex talk, but I also do a lot of research on storytelling and sense making when it comes to how couples make sense of miscarriage or pregnancy loss.
Okay.
So
And then, so the students that are enrolling in your classes, what are some of maybe the fields or industries that they're going into
Yeah, that's a
generally?
great question. So a lot of them, like Creighton's a health science school, but a lot of them are communication studies majors. A lot of them are psych majors, and then a
Okay.
lot of them are students who want to go into like professional or health disciplines. So they want to
Okay.
be doctors, they want to be nurses, they want to be therapists. And so they'll kind of take my courses to kind of understand, how do I talk about family communication topics across the lifespan from
Yeah.
birth to death? How do I talk about dark sides of relationships, or interpersonal communication? So they want to kind of what people call the soft skills, but I call core skills, right? They want
Yeah.
to gain some of those skills.
Okay. I love that. Wonderful. So, what drew you? I know you said you've always kind of liked these conversations, but what drew you to especially talking and supporting families with sexual health and bodies and
Yeah.
all that fun stuff?
I think growing up, I grew up in a house where I have three younger siblings
Okay.
who are wonderful. We're very close in age. We're still really close now. And two wonderful parents where we had a lot of warm, inclusive conversations as a family around a lot of topics. But the
Okay.
one thing that we didn't talk a lot about was the sex talk,
Mm-hmm.
and I had two parents, very knowledgeable, very willing to talk about things, but somehow it never really just emerged, never really
Okay.
came up. And my siblings and I have talked about that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's relatable to a lot of families
Absolutely.
where a lot of parents, and I find this in my research, a lot of parents, they want to have this conversation with their kid.
Yeah.
They care about their kids' health, and their relationships, but they just don't know where to start
Yeah.
or what it looks like. I also remember as a kid, my mom took me to this class on puberty, and I remember as like a small human being like, oh, this is nice. Now I can, like, this makes sense now how my body's going to work differently
Okay.
when I go through puberty.
Yeah.
And I remember just feeling a little bit more at ease with that information. And so it kind of drew me to the idea, one, of how can we empower young people to just feel comfortable in their bodies and comfortable in relationships and comfortable
Yes.
talking about topics. And a lot of times parents are that guide for them, right?
Mm-hmm.
That help
Sets
them.
the tone a little bit.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
Or a lot of it.
yeah. So I just love that because it the idea is, I mean, we're probably going to get into this too, but
Yeah.
like, I think a lot of parents too, I can relate to this, is sometimes I'm like, I just want to be perfect for my kids. I just
Sure.
want to do what's best for them,
Yeah.
but I'm going to probably mess up. Right. And
Yes. All of
so it's
us.
the same thing with the sex talk. Like, I don't think of it as the sex talk. I think of it as like healthy relationships.
Okay.
Because really the first conversations you start having are really more about relationships, right? And like body parts.
Yeah.
And so I think about like, what does it look like to be a good friend? Well, that can be similar qualities it looks like to be in a good dating relationship, right? In a marital relationship, in an intimate relationship. And so a lot of the conversations aren't like the birds and the bees,
Right.
as people say, or how babies are made or the actual sexual act. It's more about what looks healthy in relationship. What does communication look like with people you're close with, right? And some of those just basic things. And it doesn't maybe feel so scary then.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Well, and one of the kind of focuses or goals of our chat today is trying to help whoever's listening, but we have mostly mom listeners, to feel
Yeah.
supported and informed, because we know that talking about our bodies with our children and sexual health and relationships can be awkward, and we can feel like we're doing it wrong. And many of us weren't given great models for these conversations growing up. I know for me, my parents did a lot of things right and a lot of things they missed the mark for sure. But I vividly remember my mom gave me a book on my body changing or bodies changing, and it was for boys and for girls. And I mean, when I tell you I like studied that book, right, because I was so curious and I was so interested, and I remember her going through it with me the first time, and then it was just kind of mine to look at. And I had this little bestie, and like we were probably in like third grade,
Yeah.
and we would look at it, and it had this like kind of like transition of like a small baby to all the way to like an older woman, and it showed like different body changes, and they were naked, and like their hair, and so it was like I had an idea of what to expect, which I appreciate. I think maybe where she missed the mark was like the continued conversation. But yeah, there's lots of ways that we can have these chats, and so today our goal is just to give people some informed tips and
Yeah.
guidelines, and also just letting parents know, just start. Like, I think it's never too early to start having topic or conversations around the topic of body parts and consent and those sorts of things. So I'm excited to jump into this chat with you today.
Well, can I talk a little bit about just the story you
Totally.
shared?
Yeah.
So the story you shared is not uncommon to so many young girls and young boys, right? That here you have a mom who used a resource, which is so great, right? And she actually did it with you, which, so a lot of my first early research was actually looking at high schools, like students or, adolescents, and kind of exploring what a lot of sex education out there is developed and formed by adults, which makes sense, right? But a lot of times it's missing that adolescent or the young person perspective. And I feel like young people should have a perspective of what is meaningful to them, what matters to them, what helps them feel empowered, right? And so a lot of them talked about, well, my mom gave me a book, but then she just left me with it, right? Or they just said, don't have sex. And I was like, okay, thank you. Right. Like the idea of, so a lot of times two parents think, especially as the generations go, like even if they had that one talk, they're like, I did it. I had a sex talk with my parent or my kid. Good job for me, right? I made it. Where parents don't realize that it's actually this, it can be this really cool ongoing conversation about bodies and consent and relationships. And yes, the sexual act, right? But it can be this thing that can be established, and it can be something we talk about, I don't know if I want to say daily, but it can be a normal thing we talk about in our family at the dinner table that doesn't feel weird and icky. I also want to say too, it's also okay if it feels uncomfortable and weird, or if moms feel uncertain or unsure. A lot of my data on parents will say that they feel that way, but it's also because they care. Right? A lot of times when we feel, how am I going to talk to my son about this? I'm feeling nervous and a little worried. It means I care, because I care about him. I care about his future relationships. And so I think moms should know too, like, give yourself some credit. Like, here you are navigating through this. You're thinking through it already, which is awesome.
Yes,
like
you get a gold star already.
Yeah. And so your story you told about your mom was just so great, because there were so many good things. There was a great starting point, and then it also emphasized young people are curious. Like the research I've done, young people say, I want my parents to talk about me, because I think talk to me. I think a lot of parents think my kids don't want me to talk about this with them. And the truth is they don't want to be left alone. And yes, they can look at the internet. Yes, they can look at social media and media. Yes, they can talk to their friends, but they might not get accurate information, or might be misled, where parents can be they can come to them and they can say, hey mom, at school today, someone said this. And you can be like, oh, that's interesting. Yeah, actually that's not correct, but do you want to talk through it a little bit together? Right. And so you can kind of do that correction piece too as a parent and navigate that.
Yes. So many nuggets of wisdom that I just want to highlight in what I heard, my ears heard, and I want to highlight to others. One is that it's not a one and done conversation, right? This isn't the sex talk or the birds and the bees talk. This is communication that's ongoing and evolving through the development of your child. And the second thing is our kids are curious no matter what. And so like I think of, do I want them getting it on the internet or from Billy down the street, or do I want them getting accurate information from me? I'm equipping them with knowledge, which is what I do with everything, right? Like even with my toddlers, about like we look both ways before we cross the street. Like I'm equipping them with safety knowledge, and that's what I want to do with their sexual health as well. So just highlighting those important things. So with kind of this, when I say like it's an ongoing conversation, so my philosophy is like talking early with kids, and like in my family. So I'll just say, as a mental health therapist, and I predominantly work with women, unfortunately, I hear so many stories of women being abused sexually. And so a lot of times, most of the time, there is a lot of guilt and shame there. And, maybe like never telling anyone and feeling like that was their fault. But to my ears are like, you didn't have the knowledge or the language, you weren't equipped with that to be able to share about the harm that happened to you. And so I probably lean a little too far the other way with my own kids because of those stories, but we are talking about our bodies and consent right out the gate. And so tell me a little bit about like your thoughts or views about like when is too early and what you say to parents about.
Yeah. I mean, I agree with you. It's never too early to talk about just body awareness, right?
Yeah.
And I think a lot of times too, and even when we talk about some of these topics in my college classrooms, right? But a lot of my students are surprised when we talk about consent. And I say, you can start talking about consent right away. Like even when my kids were really tiny and I still was helping them wash their bodies,
Yeah.
I would say, now I'm going to wash your penis. Is that okay? Right. And so using the appropriate terminology,
Yes.
not providing nicknames for it,
Yes.
because sometimes nicknames then can get, if they do go to a trusted adult, they have a nickname for it and the trusted adult's confused by it. Right. And so vagina, penis. Right. And so even asking my children, when it comes, especially when it comes to even touching their bodies, like, can I give you a hug today before school?
Yeah.
Can I give you a kiss? Just even stuff that is like, if you're like your brother's wrestling with you and he says stop, then we stop. Right. It's this idea of, it's about communication. It doesn't always have to be like, I think a lot of times people put consent in this intimate or sexual thing. And actually it's just about, what do I feel comfortable about how people are around me and the boundaries I have? And it's okay to, if grandma comes over and she's leaving, I'll be like, do you want to give her a high five? Do you want to give her a wave? Do you want to give her a hug? And luckily I have, grandparents that are totally cool with any of that. Right. And they'll be like, whatever you want. And often they do give them a hug, but I give them power over their own bodies. We also talk about, all these are body parts and they're named elbows, hands, right? Penis. But some body parts are private, right? And so those private parts should really not be touched by anybody unless there's permission for that, right? When in a safe environment, when you're old, older, right? And so we talk about a lot of that, even when we go to the doctor, and I have an awesome pediatrician. But they do, at the annual checks, they will check the penis, those kind of things, especially on boys. And she'll be like, is it okay if I check his penis? And I go, you can ask him. And so I allow him to, even in these places where quote unquote doctors are supposed to be trusted adults in a medical profession, I also still want him to, because if he says no, which he has actually before, and my doctor is very good about being like, okay, today I don't really have to, but we will probably again, but if you're not there, that's fine. Right. And so the idea of sometimes we have to do things. I also think about it with shots. Kids never, I don't know a kid who likes shots, right? No. And I don't ever want to feel like I have to hold down my child to get a shot. But at the same point, it's for their health, right? And so that has been a really hard conversation, and even in my own family of like, we really work about talking it through. So when we get there, they're still nervous. We're holding their hands. We're there for them. It's okay to be sad. Nervous. It's okay to cry, right? But this is really important for your health. And so talking it through so that I hopefully don't have to hold them down. As parents, though, there's been moments when we had to do that, and but just being able to make it a conversation every day.
And that communication, that honesty, right? So what we some of that language we do when our kids are really little in our house is, again, like you said, we use the appropriate terms for their body, just like elbow, knee, vagina. I tried to get everyone to say vulva, but no one would. So I had to let it go. So,
fair,
vagina,
fair.
But, and so we use those terms, and then we practice, I'm the boss of my body. That's just a term we use all the time.
That's a great phrase.
And so I'm also raising these little fierce, independent queens.
Same.
And so they are always telling me, and when it's like, get in your car, I'm the boss of my body. Oh, well, this is a safety rule that mom is having. You have to get in your car seat. Unfortunately, that's a safety rule. But we kind of play this dance of like, when I have to override it, like the car seat, and when it's like, yep, you're right, I can let that go. You're right. You're the boss of your body. And it's so funny now that, and this is just kind of a silly antidote, but my husband, he cannot smack my booty in the kitchen without permission, because these queens will be like, Dad, mom is the boss of her body. And I'm like, thank you. Yes, that was not, I did not want you to do that while I was bending over. So thank you. And so they're learning. The other thing that we say is like respecting the no. So we started this probably about 18 months, maybe 2-ish. But we would play a tickle game, and I would tell them the game of the rules. Now, anytime you say no, mom will say, okay, and I will stop and I will respect the no. And we would practice that and just giving them that language. Like, you can say no. Just because I'm your mom or an adult that you love and care for, you can tell me no because you're the boss of your body. And so those are just some of those little ways. Like you said, it's nothing about intimacy or sex. It's just about body autonomy and learning about the safety rules of
Yeah.
their body.
So one thing with my boys is that we talk a lot about is trusting your body too, like
Oh,
trusting that
yes.
instinct. If something
Yes.
feels weird, something
So
probably
important.
is weird, right? And so
Yes.
really finding at a young age to trust your body when you feel safe, when you don't feel safe, those kind of things, and then reflect on it. And as a kid, find a trusted adult to work through that too, if you want. And the other thing too, with like food related stuff, we always say, trust your body, like,
Yes.
are you full? Now, let's be honest, like, do they trust their body when there's endless candy around? Maybe not, right? But the idea that we can kind of work through that too, of like, hey, your body, and that like moderation and all that kind of stuff is totally have a treat, right? But like, just be careful because sometimes if you have too much, your stomach feels icky, right?
Yeah.
But it's not only trust your body maybe around food, but trusting your body around environments, around relationships, around people.
Yes.
Because your body's telling you something, and that is
Absolutely.
okay, and you can trust that.
Yes, such an important message that I know, like, I wasn't taught as a young person. And so I've shared this before, but I'll share it again. When we did potty training with our kids, I was teaching them how to check in with their body. Does your body have to pee? And one of my nieces, who was a teenager, we were on like a family vacation, and she's like, why do you always say check in with your body? And so I explained to her, like, it's not just the potty training that I'm trying to help her. I just really want her to get into a practice of taking a moment, looking inward, checking with her body, because kind of like you were implying, and I know to be true, is that like if they are in an unsafe situation or with someone that is making them feel uncomfortable or they're getting an icky feeling, my hope is that they're already so in tune with their body that they're listening to those signals and they can leave or tell me or do something like that. And so
and label that, right? Like label their feelings, label their emotions around it, make sense of it. And again, parents can help be a guide for that. Moms can be, moms and dad, right? But like moms can be a guide for they're feeling a certain way. Man, I feel kind of uncomfortable when I do new things too, right? And so, and my heart sometimes gets beating fast and I'm a little nervous, but actually sometimes I'm also excited because I like excited about this new thing, but I'm also nervous, right? And so even as a mom, being able to share with them my emotions in different situations and how I trust my body and I work through things, helps them see that too, right?
We're modeling that all the time. Okay, so we chatted a little bit about like this entry point that we can have with like, young children about teaching appropriate body parts, consent, things like that. At a young age, I guess before I jump to the next kind of age group, I think of kids touch themselves and it feels pleasurable. How can parents have those chats with their kids in a way that is not inducing shame?
Yeah, that's such a great question, and one I get a lot. So I actually have, and I've shared this with you. I started a sex ed book club because everyone's doing book clubs, right? And I had so many friends, or even friends of friends, being like, someone would say, "This is what she does," and they'd be like, "Oh my God, tell me right now, help me," right? And again, I had some tools for them, like just off the cuff, random ones, but I also was like, one of the things that came up a lot was masturbation, and so. It's an interesting topic, right? Or just touching yourself and exploring yourself, right? Because the thing is, getting a massage feels really good on the shoulders. We're not really thinking much about that, right? Compared to when we get to the private parts, right? And so kind of going back to your question is that allow your child to kind of explore their bodies, right? And you kind of see them exploring their bodies. One, if it's in a public place, that's when you can maybe have a conversation about like, hey, these are private parts, so it's more for private spaces, right? But there's nothing wrong with you exploring it. For example, moms will say to me, I had my daughter found my like a back massager, and then it vibrated and she said, "Oh, that kind of felt good.
That tickles."
Yeah, it tickles or it feels good. And she's like, "Yeah, just like it can feel good here, it can feel good in different places." But also you want to make sure when your kids are exploring their bodies that they're doing it safely too, and they're not putting things in orifices or things that could be hurtful or dangerous. And so even just kind of talking to them about what's safe and what that can look like. I feel like I haven't fully answered that question.
No, and I'm navigating too of like, because it's so it's perspective and it's nuanced based on your child's age and what your family's already talked about or haven't talked about. So it's so nuanced. But like with my 4 and 7-year-old, my 4-year-old's always digging in her pants and like she's also digging in her nose all the time, you know?
Yep.
And so we talk about, oh, like I see that you're exploring your body. That's something that you can do in the bathroom or in your bedroom, but we don't do that when we're in the living room or at the grocery store. And then I'm about like cleanliness. So
Yes.
whether she's digging in her nose and she's digging in her butt a lot of the time. I'm sure she's not itching or she's itchy because she's not wiping good. But I'm like, let's wash our hands, right? Like before and after. And so I'm giving her permission to get to know her body, but in ways that are safe and socially acceptable.
Yeah. Well, and I also say too, like we start with those conversations with our kids of, hey, knowing your body, comfortable with body, where do different places feel kind of good? There's no shame in exploring your body in a safe way, in a clean way, right? And then when they get older, exploring like more detailed of masturbation and what that can look like. And
when you say older, what age-ish comes to mind for you?
I mean, again, every family is a little different on their timelines. And I would say my kids' timelines are probably a little earlier than everybody else's. But, I would say, pre-adolescence. And so the idea of or what we call middle childhood, but like around 10, especially like some kids are more curious than other kids too. And so, for example, my older son is someone who likes to read facts. He likes to know knowledge. We had the like how babies are made conversation pretty early because we watched a lot of documentaries. And so he was like, I see these penguins doing this thing that makes a baby. Is that what kind of looks like for humans? And I'm like, it does. It's a little different, but it's kind of a similar concept. What questions do you have? Right? Kind of letting him lead that. Right. And so to me, it's kind of child-led. Some kids that are more curious about their bodies, you're going to have a conversation with them earlier compared to kids that maybe aren't. But again, a lot of times there's this theory out there that kind of let kids lead, which I agree with, right? Kind of let them lead with information they want. But some of it they don't know that they don't know. And so I think it's also important to kind of bring
like our responsibility as well.
So the other night, I'll use an example in a story. The other night, my sons, they both know about, waking up in the morning and sometimes their penis can be hard and that's natural and okay. Right. Also, I want to say too, I think it's really important for parents to, like you talked about in your example of their book with your mom, that you knew how both bodies, like men and women bodies look. So with my boys, they know I'm the only female in our house. Right. And so I have different body parts than them. So, but we have a lot of books and a lot of resources around so that they know what the difference is between men and women. And we've talked about very inclusivity and a lot of that stuff. Right. And so we had already talked a lot about penises and that you wake up and it's normal to have that. Also, sometimes they're silly about it. Right. And that's okay to be silly and around it. And so we'd already talked about that, but we were at my sex ed book club and we were talking about some stuff and it made me think about, man, I have a 10-year-old and we haven't talked about nocturnal emission or wet dreams yet. And I'm like, he's getting to the age where, like I don't want him to wake up one morning and be left with that information of like, what happened? And should I be scared or should I be nervous? And honestly, knowing him, he'd probably come to his dad and I and be like, this happened. And we'd be like, oh buddy, it's normal, you know? But I was like, hey, again, we're just at our dinner room table. I'm like, hey, I actually was at book club the other day and my boys know I'm having this book club about bodies and health and stuff. And I was like, I actually haven't talked to you about, they call it nocturnal emission, they call it wet dreams, like different things. And I was like, is there any chance you'd want to like talk a little bit with me about it? And he goes, sure, what is it? And I just explained to him that there can be, that semen can come out of the penis and it can be wet and you can wake up and there's nothing wrong about it. It's totally normal and it can just happen. Or sometimes, especially when you start going through puberty, you might have, and he is very much expressed and shared that he likes girls, and stuff. And so I was like, it could also be you have a little dream about kissing a girl and you woke up with it and that's totally normal. And he's like, okay, got it. Yeah. All right. And he's processing. I'm like, do you have any other questions? And he's like, nope, I don't think so. That's good. And like, you can tell it. My other 7-year-old is just bouncing a basketball around the house. And again, we're a pretty open household about all things. There's no shaming. No question is a bad question. And so I ask my 7-year-old, you're kind of around. You heard me talking to your brother. You also have a penis. Is there any questions you have? And he goes, sticky penis. Got it. And he just like, he just walks away. Right.
Way of processing
and like, that's okay. Like it can kind of be that, right? Because we're normalizing that conversation in the household, you know?
Yeah.
And like we talked about naming body parts. So here I am in a quote unquote sex educator, right? Teach classes on this. And I'm saying it's a penis, it's a vagina, it's a vulva, right? And my 7-year-old, because I think, you know, like they like to be spicy sometimes, he calls his 7-iron.
Oh,
right.
He's a golfer.
Yep. He's a golfer. Right. And so it's something we laugh about, but in the back of his mind, he knows what the appropriate term. And so I just want parents to know too, that your kids are going to play with things. They're going to test you. They're going to, but I think it's also like, it says something about our family is that he feels safe to just talk about it naturally.
Yeah.
To give it a little nickname, even though he knows the appropriate terminology for it.
Yeah, absolutely. So we kind of talked about littles, and then I'm just curious, like when, at least, and maybe the research gives us some guidance on this, when are kids most curious about like the mechanics of sex and intimacy? Is there a range there that we can prepare for?
Gosh, I mean,
or get ahead of?
Yeah. And I would say too, every kid is so different.
Yeah.
Every kid in each household, every kid in different families. But I would say they're still going to start to get curious right before puberty. Okay. It's probably just going to be a natural thing that they start to get curious. A lot of the data that I've had with adolescents where they've talked about, like, I started getting curious. I started kind of wanting to know more information. I started to search it on my own. And then my parents had a conversation with me at 16, because, you know, 16 is when you start dating, whatever. Right. And it felt late. It felt too, it was already past. I already knew in a sense what it was from other information. Right. And so then it didn't feel as meaningful compared to when their parent had more ongoing conversations about sex related topics, that then it would just naturally build onto the sex act. Right. And what it can look like and how it might vary depending on relationship type and those kind of things.
And when are they having, I don't even know, because I'm not there yet in my parenting years. When are they having sex education in school? Is that like 5th grade? I don't know.
Yeah. So it depending on the school and depending on the state. Sure. Right. And so a lot of schools don't do really anything, but some of those health science schools, usually it's around 5th or 6th grade. Okay. And so
like, are we thinking we need to get ahead of that to make sure they have a base level of knowledge? Or are we thinking, I laugh because I'm thinking of, like, for example, when I taught my kid how to tie her shoes, I was like, oh, I thought the school would teach her that. I need to teach her that, you know? So I'm like, I could see how some parents are like, I'll just let the school take care of it because I don't want to have that awkward conversation. But we know.
Yeah. Well, and I would say 2 things. One, depending on your family, like in our family, we talk about that we have hard, uncomfortable conversations. That's what we do as a family. Okay. And that's just a natural thing, so that when you go into the world, when you go to school, we're already having those, we're already kind of setting the tone for it. So when you go to school there, you're going to learn knowledge. You might even learn some new things, and you can come home and we can talk more about that. Yeah. But we've kind of given you that foundation. Now, one, based on the work that I do, I have access to more knowledge and more research, right? And so for a lot of families, that conversation in 5th grade, the kid might come home, maybe they need to have something signed if they can do it, or they come home and they said, oh, we learned about this in health science today. Yeah. That might be the first place where the parents are like, wow, maybe I need to talk a little bit more with him. So it could be a really nice place. Like, instead of thinking of it as like, I'm late, you can think of it as like, okay, this seems like maybe
an entry point
where we start these conversations.
Yeah.
And that maybe as a parent, I search out some more knowledge. There's so much knowledge out there. That's really hard too as a parent, right? As a mom, I'm constantly thinking, well, yeah, I can find all the information I need, but what's the most accurate, what's the best, or whatever. And I also come from a place of what is the best for my family, because every family has a different culture and dynamic and the way they communicate and talk. And so the sex talks, right, or those ongoing conversations about health relationships are going to look different.
Yeah.
I also think one thing too, when we're talking about if you've set your child up we've talked about relationships, what healthy relationships look like, what it means to be a good friend and consent, right, and all those things, it should feel more natural to go into the act. But I know with a lot of parents, it's really awkward to think about their child one day having sex, right? And so it's part of that part is like not just thinking about what you say to them, but that you're saying something to them in a meaningful way that's not probably perfect, and that's okay.
Yeah.
But that builds the connection. So it's actually less about the conversation and more about building that connection in that space where they can maybe come and ask you questions too, of like, I've started dating someone, and like they might be comfortable kind of navigating through that with you, because you've opened that space and never like been like, oh my gosh, I can't talk about that. Right. Or if they don't know information, a kid comes, I think, a lot of parents come to me and they say, what if they ask me a question just out of left field and I have no idea? And I'm like, that's parenthood. Right. But also if you don't know the answer to it, which I've had a lot of questions I haven't known the answer to when my kids ask, I just say, man, that's a really good question. I really don't know the answer. Let's figure it out together.
Yeah.
Right. And so using it as a learning opportunity to be like, your parent, I'm your mom. I'm not going to know everything. I'm not going to be perfect at this, but I would love to stumble through with you.
Yes. And my 7-year-old, even, she's a very curious person, and she asks me questions at the worst time, which is usually when I'm like very busy and like I want to give it a thoughtful response and I can't. And so the other day I was driving, in Omaha traffic, and she said, you told me that 2 girls can have a baby, and Dad told me it takes a seed and a soil. And they have 2 seeds. And I'm driving through Omaha traffic and I'm like, I do not have the words. I want to have the words. I know they're back there, but I can't access. And then so I had to say, well, yes, your dad is kind of right. And I'm right. And 2 girls can have a baby. And let's chat about it a little bit more tonight when mom's not driving.
Yeah.
Right. Because I just was like, first, there's that pressure of I want to get it right for her. And then secondly, like, trying to drive this car and do it safely. But then the part is I have to come back to it, right? Because I don't want her to learn, like, when mom says that it's too hard for her and she avoids it, right? And so having to come back to the conversation. And that also leads me to when you say, come and talk to me about anything, be prepared for that. Because I had a nephew who had just had the sex talk and came with a pamphlet home from school, and I happened to pick him up that day. And I was flipping through the pamphlet, he's doing his own thing. And then I said to him, thinking I'm being a good auntie who's a therapist, like, feel free to ask me any questions, like anytime, bud. And he's like, okay, I have one right now. And I was like, and it was like a very technical term. And I was like, like I kind of thought you'd probably never come to me. And here you are, so be prepared.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, you're great.
Well, and I was going to say too, I always want to tell, we have a lot of moms listening, but like telling parents, but moms, that if your kid's coming to you with questions, that means they feel safe. That means they feel like they can be seen in this situation. And you want to keep that throughout their entire life, And a lot of people talk about, adolescence is so hard. And again, every stage of parenthood and childing is so hard because we're just learning how to navigate it together, right?
Yes.
But when it comes to the challenges of quote unquote adolescence, when they're becoming more independent, they're trying to empower themselves, they want to be more autonomy, like have more autonomy, right?
Yeah.
Like the idea that if you've created a solid connection about not just sex related topics, but that we can have hard conversations together and we can navigate them through together and we're not going to be judging each other, that will be really nice in adolescence.
Yes.
And so part of me too is telling parents, like, if you can set up and talk about the quote unquote easier things, I'm not saying that they're easy when they're little, like, that can be really great. And back to your story about your daughter saying the seed and the soil, right? Or a lot of times people talk about
the seed.
I was dying,
by the way, of like, when did he tell her this? And like, how did that come up? Like, anyways.
And I also think it comes back to how I think sometimes we have this myth of the sex talk is like, a parent coming into the room and saying, today is the day we're going to talk about sex. And the kid saying, tell me more, right? Or whatever, right? And we know that it's like these little moments in the car. Like some of my best conversations, my most meaningful conversations with my boys have been in the car on the way to do some errand, right? And so just being able to take a hold of those conversations and use them in a way that sets up more foundation for more conversations. But the also is, as a parent, we're busy, we're stressed, we've got a lot going on, we're trying to figure out what's for dinner and then also get the groceries for that dinner. And our kid just asked us a big question. and we want to get it right,
Yeah.
it's okay to say, I'd love to talk about that with you later.
Yeah.
And then later that night, you go into her room and you say, hey, you had that great question earlier today.
Yeah.
And I want to work through that with you. Right.
Uh-huh.
And so the other thing I want to say too is sometimes parents, when they get or you're talking about your nephew, right? You get a conversation or you get a question and you're like, I don't even know where to start. You can always ask the child too, where does this question come from?
Yes.
What do you know? What do you already know about?
And that saves me time.
Yes, right. Exactly. And what do you already know about the seed in the soil or whatever it is? And they'll be like, well, this. And you'll be like, yeah, you're right onto it. And we can add a little bit. Or if they ask you a question of how a baby is made, right? And you say a seed and the soil, or sometimes people say a sperm and an egg, and the egg goes into the sperm goes into the egg and it creates a baby, and then the baby's in the uterus and it grows, right? That actually, you'd be like, do you want to know anything else? And they might be like, no, I got it now, right? And so I think sometimes when a kid asks us a question, we're already at thinking 5 questions ahead.
Yeah.
And maybe they just want that one question answered.
So maybe being mindful of like where they're at and not feeling like we have to over explain. And
And that's my kryptonite, because I get so excited when my boys ask me anything related to relationships and sex and stuff like that, because, this is what I do for my job. And so they'll come and they'll tell me something, or they'll say something to me, and I have to remind myself, keep it chill, Amanda. Be chill, Amanda. You got this, and then just answer their question, answered and asked, right? Oh, do you have any more questions? And if they're like, no, that's good. Even though I want to say more, I'm like, cool, we can keep talking about this whenever you want. And they'll be like, yeah, got it. But like, I've even done this when they've come to me before, and then they're like, yeah, I was thinking about asking Dad, but you always get so excited when we ask you questions. And I was like, oh man, I was trying to keep it chill with you. And they're like, oh Mom, you've got no chill, and I'm like, you're right, I don't, but I get so excited. But I also think they tell me things because they know I get excited about, like, oh my gosh, that's probably related to puberty's coming, that's so exciting, right? Instead of like, oh, puberty's coming, right? We've had a lot of puberty conversations. I have a 10-year-old and a 7-year-old, and a lot of the research will tell us out there that puberty is happening earlier and earlier because of our environments and all this stuff. And so we've had a lot of conversations about like puberty for females, because I have 2 males, but I've really wanted to, a lot of the research and the data that I've found is that just being informative in general is really powerful. And so I've let them take tampons and pads and just like fill them with water or whatever, and kind of talk about what this means when a female goes through puberty, breast buds, those kind of things, because a lot of the stuff with puberty with boys, we don't see it. With girls, we see it. And so we also talked about, this is a space for not only, what does puberty look like for a male and a female and those kind of things, but how can we be kind humans when people are going through puberty? Right? So the first thing that happens in puberty isn't actually the body changing, it's emotions. Sometimes people overreact. Sometimes people are more emotional for boys and for girls. And so if you see a friend going through that, just be a kind friend, be supportive. No, they might be have an off day. It might not be related to hormones, but it might be, right? And so we have even those conversations with our boys, because both my boys have a lot of female friends, and I want them to be a good, kind friend to both their boys and their friends that are girls.
Yes, such important conversations. And just normalizing that these are natural body
They're beautiful
things that are happening, because I think especially as it relates to periods, there's so much shame around it, and then it's like yucky, or like you have to keep it private. I was just talking to a friend the other day of like how it wasn't until much later in my adulthood where I wasn't embarrassed to like carry a tampon to the bathroom. It was like hiding it, and my whole life I did that, until one day I was like, why am I like feeling embarrassed to have a tampon, which is like nothing I have control over in my body and is such a normal human experience, but we just are given, or like even the language around it, like, ew, gross. Like I'm careful with my girls around that, because I don't have a lot of privacy. They follow me everywhere. And so they know about periods. And they're still learning, right? But I try not to be like, oh, I'm on my period, or like even to my husband, because they're always listening, right? And I don't want to make it this thing that has to be either shameful or embarrassed or dreadful, because it's something that they will experience.
And it's so beautiful. So another story I have that emerged is that we talk about periods, and as of right now too, the boys are so comfortable with like, we're pretty open and again, not a lot of privacy, but I think that'll change and shift and we'll kind of see that happen. But one of my good friends was bringing, her son is one of best friends, and she was bringing him home from some activity they were doing. And I had been busy and pretty stressed at work. And so she said some comment to Dean, like, how's your mom been? I know she's been pretty busy. And he goes, yeah, she's kind of cranky today. And she's like, oh, that's too bad. And he goes, she's on her period. And that's totally normal. Sometimes you're like, you just have emotions with hormones and stuff. And it's not gross at all. Like a lot of women have periods, and so he's explaining to it in this 10-year-old way. And his friend, who's in middle school, a little older than him, was like, ew, gross. And he's like, it's not gross. It's not gross, like this idea of like, he then also, like not corrected a friend, but and she told me, and she goes, I have to tell you the story because it's so great. And also I apparently need to talk to my son a little bit more, right? And she's also had really good conversation with her kids, but every kid's a little different too, and how they react to it. But that was like a proud moment for him where he's like, no, that's not gross. That's normal. And also emotions can be part of, it can be beautiful and great, but also it can make us a little cranky or like, feel on edge or something like that, like hormones shift. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Love those conversations. So for parents that are listening and are maybe nervous on how to get started on having these conversations, what guidance would you offer them?
Yeah, I would say be kind to yourself, because if you're feeling nervous about having the conversation, it means you care about your kids and you want the best for them. And relationships is something we have our entire life from birth to death. In my opinion, yes, we teach math, reading, and all these really good things, but in my opinion, we should have classes on relationships from throughout their entire life, right? And conversations, how to have good conversations. And so I would say, if you're feeling nervous or unsure, one, you probably didn't have your own roadmap.
Yeah.
Many of us didn't, and that's okay. But that just to start simple, right? And to try to find some simple resources out there. The internet can be crazy, but it also can be a really great place, right?
Are there any resources that you recommend or share for parents?
Yeah.
That's accurate?
And so, right now I'm actually creating a website.
Okay, yeah. Tell us more.
So it's let'schangethetalk.com. And we're trying to, one, it has all my publications and it has my research team, because I have a research team with undergrads, so young people too, that keep, the information in the sense of what's going on in young people's experiences and minds. But my plan, right now we're building a workbook that is meant for a parent and their kid to do it together.
Oh, that's awesome.
And so it starts really little, where you literally have a picture of a shape of a little human, and you can dress them and you can color them, right? And it kind of goes through different age groups. And so we're really working on some of that. But some great, oh my gosh, I need to kind of think through some of the resources. But like, for example, Planned Parenthood has a lot of really great resources about sex education and those kind of things. I'm trying to think.
We do have the book, and it's an older book, but it's not about the stork, which is a very older book.
There's 3 versions.
Still, and we might hopefully have that updated. But I will say also, whatever resources you do as a parent choose to land on, preview it. I have a few podcasts too that I've listened and to try and help that are appropriate for kids. But with that book specifically, I had like bought in it and put it like on the counter, and then we had a babysitter, and so my kids were like, read this, and the babysitter was like, I was like, oh God, I'm so sorry to the babysitter, to be feeling like they had that pressure on them, but I hadn't even looked at it yet fully. And so and that is like a huge book that has a lot of different information
and a lot of detail in that book too. And I would say it's not the stork, it's perfectly normal. It's the different ones in that series are really good. They're very detailed, but really good. I would say, yes, preview it. And you don't have to read every page either. Like you can kind of, they have a question, you can go to that
like
page.
1 or 2 pages at a time.
And I would say too, like, what the other thing we're working on right now is a book list, recommended book list for you and your child. And for then, as it's going to be separated by developmental ages. So that can be chapter books as we get into older kids. And then it can be just like books for you to read about sex related topics, identity, those kind of things. And so, yeah, those are
I love that.
yeah. So I think like books are great resources.
So parents can check out your website now and it's still developing,
Yes. Yep.
right?
So they can
Okay.
get to it now. It's still developing. But we have a whole page. It's like resources. And so that's where we're going to be putting hopefully we're going to have even the book list, recommended book list up here soon. Different like resources that we really find that I find to be very helpful.
Yeah.
Because that's the other thing too, is you want something that's inclusive, medically accurate, and that, you can connect with your kids on with
Uh-huh.
different things that
Uh-huh.
they can explore and ask questions, and they can kind of look through and be like, what's this,
Yeah.
but they're definitely, I would say there's age appropriate kind of stuff too. Because if you want to, like there's that one you were talking about with the series, like you would probably start with the first one. It's not the stork, then before going into some of the more, they're now 8 compared to 3.
Yeah. One thing I wanted to mention, and I'm curious your thoughts or if there's any research on this, is that I hear from some parents that they're worried if they share information about sexual health too soon, that it will somehow encourage kids to engage in sexual behaviors too early.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I have multiple publications on this.
Okay.
So,
I didn't even know that.
yeah.
I feel
So, I love this question.
underprepared.
So I've looked at it from an adolescent perspective. And so adolescents who reported getting sexual health information, sex related topics from their parents earlier actually were safer when they started to engage in sexual behavior, and they had a later sexual debut. So they waited a lot longer.
Okay.
And this has been consistent through my research and people who do similar research to me, is that actually giving your child information is power, power for them to wait, power for them to say no, power for them to say, I'm not quite ready. But then when they are ready, then they have the tools to do it safely, to be in a safe space, those kind of things. And so the other thing that I've found in my parent focus groups, though, is they have these tensions. And so parents have this tension, like you just talked about sexual education versus overexposure.
Yeah.
Right. So they're this idea that I want to teach and guide them, but what if I do this and now I'm teaching them how to do it, right? Like now I'm encouraging them, well, now you know how to do it, so go do it, right? And that I have not found that in my research at all. At no point from an adolescent's perspective, have they thought that the more comprehensive, the more information that they've gotten has led them to engage in it. It actually, a lot of times it's based on curiosity, is when kids, especially at a young age, explore. It's because they're curious of how it all works. And then they get into a situation where they aren't quite sure what to do, but I guess we're going to be curious together, where if the parents would have talked to them a lot about it, they wouldn't be so curious about it. And they're maybe not going to engage as an early of an age.
Okay. I think that's great. Is there anything else as it pertains to your research that we haven't gotten to yet that you're like, oh my gosh, these nuggets of wisdom just need to be shared today?
Yeah. One thing I want to talk about is some colleagues and I just published a study that was on young people's experience when it comes to like basically college agents, or we call them emerging adults, experience about stories they heard from their siblings, their friends, and their parents. And so we asked them, tell me a time that you heard a story about sex-related topics from your friend, sibling, and your parent. And what was super interesting is that there was a lot of themes that emerged in the story, right? That they got a lot of vivid experiences from their peers, right? Like telling sex stories, right?
Yeah.
Maybe normalizing some of the sex stuff, maybe normalizing some risk stuff, right? Where parents were really nice at giving the safety and support types of stories. And then the siblings were kind of in the middle. They're like, I'm your peer, but I also want you to be safe, right? And so I'm not going to tell you this crazy sex story and normalize maybe risky behavior, but I'm going to say it's normal to be curious and engage in sexual activities in college, but like also let's think about your own values and your beliefs and what you want in a healthy relationship, right? Like siblings can be that. The finding that we found so cool though is that we looked at not only what story themes emerged, but we looked at how the stories helped us make sense of ourselves and our relationships. And so some of it would say, it's a common experience. Some of them would say it's for committed and loving relationships. Like, right, those stories, my mom told me the story and it made me realize I want to have a loving and committed relationship, like the story she said, right? It also, the big thing that maybe not that is surprising, but it was a really important takeaway, is that like stories can be helpful of making sense of the relationship.
Mm-hmm.
So you hear a story or you tell a story, and the way the person you're interacting with in the story can shape if that's a person you tell the story to again, if that's a person you would come and talk to about sex related topics, or if someone tells a story about shame and that this person did this and that's very shameful, that's now not a safe person for you to share your stuff with, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so that sharing stories about sex not only helps us make sense of how we make sense of like how we want in relationships,
Yeah.
what if it's normal or not, whatever. But it also helps us make sense of the storyteller and the story listener
So the
relationship.
relationship.
So I feel like with parents, like use stories as a way to kind of talk through things, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, first of all, kids learn through play, right? And stories, right? You can use stories to share, but be careful of like how we share those stories with our young kids, but also with our adolescents, because it might be a story we share and it's around, you know, morals
Mm-hmm.
and shame or something. And then we're
Mm-hmm.
like, well, now I don't know if I can ask my mom these questions, or I can go to her
Right.
about this stuff because she shared the story of this girl who was struggling
Exactly. I hear
through.
that all the time of like, my adult clients who are like, I remember telling a story about my friend who engaged in some sexualized behavior with my mom. And my mom was like, oh my God, I don't want you hanging out with her anymore.
Yes.
She's derogatory, derogatory name there. You can't. And then so it was like, oh gosh, I'm not going to go back and tell my mom about things either I did or I'm thinking about doing.
Mm-hmm.
And so that has impacted that relationship. And I
Yeah.
think of it as like that home base of being able to, that I want to be
Yeah.
for my kids, of like, you can always come to me even if I don't know all the right answers at the time, or I'm a little awkward. Like,
Yeah.
your
Well,
girl's here for you.
and also parents and young people and parents and children can have different goals, right? So, parents' goal is, I want to protect my child. I want to make sure they're not having sex too early. I want to, all this stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the child's goal can be, I want to experience relationships and I want to do it safely and I want to do it when I'm comfortable, right? And so they can be competing goals, but like I often say, like parents, we can't protect our kids, but we can prepare them.
Yeah.
And I also think like we don't want to leave them with their questions alone, right? So that
Mm-hmm.
something happened to them or they have a question about a sex related topic, and then them just to keep it to themselves, like then they're just going to ruminate about it. They're not
Mm-hmm.
going to, and so being able to be that parent that has built that connection with their kid to say, I'm going to go talk to my mom about this. She might not agree with some of the stuff that I'm going to say, but she's going to be there to listen and she's going to
Mm-hmm.
help me work through it. So I'm not alone with that information. Because
Yes.
being alone, especially as a kid, as an adolescent, even as an adult, being alone with scary information or uncertain information or taboo information
Yeah,
can be a lot.
absolutely. And then, yeah, they're going to seek information somewhere. And we know that the internet can be a scary place.
Yes.
And so I rather them come to me first instead of all those other places that may take them on a random ride.
Yeah.
Well, where can those that are listening find your resources? Share again, and then I'll put it in the show notes as well.
Yeah. So it's letschangethetalk.com. And again, we are just we're doing, it's new, we're revamping it, but there's a lot of academic research out there that I have posted that I've done. Again, that's pretty boring. Not an average person wants, I don't even know if I want to read that stuff, right? But that is there for people who are really curious. And then our goal is to be putting out resources that are tangible, that are easy to understand, that help parents navigate the idea that you can create connection with your kids in a way that's ongoing.
Mm-hmm.
It's not shame-based. It's not fear-based. It's medically accurate. And you don't have to be perfect doing it.
Yes.
And I think we've already kind of talked about that, but sometimes we have a conversation with a kid and then we are like, man, that didn't go as well as I had hoped.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to just come back.
Yeah.
Right. And I think a lot of times too, that really shows your kid that if they come to you and they're like, say something about sex related topics, but they didn't fully figure it out, that they can come back to you and be like, that's not actually the question I had. This was the question I had.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so just showing that you're not perfect as a parent.
Yes.
You're not perfect. I'm not perfect as a mom. And you don't have to be perfect as a kid as we navigate these hard topics together.
Yeah, any topic. Yeah, I think that repair and just humanness is so important to give our kids. Well, Amanda, thank you so much for joining us, having this important conversation, and for giving parents, like me and those that are listening, permission to just start these conversations, even if they're not perfect, or if we don't have all of the right language at the time. Just start. It's ongoing. It doesn't have to be a one and done. So thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And to everyone listening, if you want to check out her resources or learn more about the tools that she is creating, go to letschangethetalk.com. I'll put it in the show notes. And if you are a mom that has been avoiding this conversation because maybe you're too scared or embarrassed, my hope is that after listening to our chat today that you feel a little bit braver and more prepared. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to show up. Thanks for tuning in to Omaha Mom Talks. Take good care of yourselves, and we will chat soon. Thanks, guys. Bye.